Here's an example of multiple tiers of overhead cranes, large overhead cranes. These have to be wired so that if I'm operating this one, I can't operate these two down below, or these three, I guess, these two together. Because obviously if I'm picking up a weight and I got cable going all the way, I could have these impacted. Another very important factor to keep in mind is these little devices over here. These are the electrical conductors. Now, in a normal lower tier, like on one of these ones down at the bottom, where you can actually put a ladder up and get near those conductors, you want to make sure you don't use that as your landing platform. The outer one's grounded, and then you just put your hands up there or your feet and get electrocuted. Stops, you got to have stops. So we got examples of that here. Got to stop on this device and on down here so that the crane can't go over the end. One company I dealt with had put in a crane, forgot to put the stops in. It had an operator that put it right through the end of the building with the load. The other thing very important is a brake, because as you pick up that load, it's going to swing. So you want to have the brakes and the stops that can handle that. An example of brakes. This is a brake for the lift mechanism. These have to hold, so if I stop lifting it, it has to have sufficient braking capability to hold whatever load I'm going to be picking up. So here you got your hooks down here. If I'm picking up 100,000 pounds, which obviously in this one I can't, I got to make sure I've got more than that capacity up above. So if I'm picking up 100,000 pounds, I got to have 150,000 pounds of braking capability or more, because those brakes are going to carry it as that load swings, the pendulum effect. Here's another example of those electrical conduits, the bus. So as this travels along here, it gets energized from these three connectors because it's three-phase. Examples of the pendants. So we got down, up, west, east, south, and north. Same thing is true down here. These devices, you want to make sure you have sufficient protection so you can't inadvertently energize this. We had a guy that got hurt because he had a cheap one that didn't have the guard all the way around it. He leaned over, had it around his neck on a pedestal, leaned over and hit the up and the east button on that particular crane, energized both of those, and it swung the load because he had rigged one side but hadn't rigged the other, threw him against a big pile of steel, and he was struck with about 20,000 pounds of steel. The only thing that saved his life was the fact that there was a piece of oak cribbing in there. The standard also deals with crawler, locomotive, and truck cranes. General requirements for these. Key element is going to be understand the capacity of this unit. It's putting all of its force right here. The truck chassis can only handle a little bit of weight. When you get that crane all the way out here, you either need to have an outrigger that's going to come down, which I believe there's a picture, there's one right here, to keep that chassis spring from bearing the weight, because otherwise you get that pendulum effect, where you get the swing. Load ratings. As I go to have this boom farther out, the bending moments, in other words, the forces on the crane here, increase. So I might only be picking up 1,000 pounds, but that 1,000 pounds is going to be times the distance from the lift point to the fulcrum, which is right here, the center pin on the crane. So if this is 100 pounds, or 100 feet, excuse me, there's going to be 100,000 pounds of force on that. Here's an example of a load chart. And as you look at it, this is the closest section. So my capacity, my radius in feet, 10 feet, with the boom at 57 degrees, I can pick up 40,000 pounds. If I extend that radius out, it drops. So I've got it at 10 feet. I can do that 40,000 pounds. As I extend the boom out more, I change that. I can pick up at 45.3 feet at the same angle of 57 degrees, I can pick up 28,000 pounds. And the farther you go out over here, and the farther that boom is extended and the angle changes, it dramatically impacts it. So if you look down here, at 55 feet, at the boom angle of 29 degrees, I can only pick up 2,600 pounds. Do not exceed the 85-foot radius. You see this says right here. Inspection. Make sure that everything is adequate. Is it maintained? Is it, when you've got a pneumatic tired crane, I've got to use the outriggers. And the load chart will tell you where you have to have the outriggers when you go to pick up a load. Is this a sufficient footing for this? No. Asphalt is only a couple of inches thick. So in this case, the employee is doing a pre-trip, making sure that everything functions before he goes and uses it. He's not going to be picking anything up. If he was, he'd have to have cribbing underneath here. Rope inspections. Look at those cables. Make sure they're in good shape. Look for broken strands. Look for crushed rope. They got a little caliper out here to check to see how thick it is. So in this case, the rope was 1 inch, and he's at 0.977 at that area where it got elongated and crushed, which means it needs to be taken out of service. Handling that load. Where's the operator going to stand? Where's the person that's directing him, the rigger? How about this guy? Balancing that load. And I'm going to tell you from personal experience, these don't swing as smoothly as one might think. So this guy's standing in definitely in harm's way. How you like having the forklift hold up the trailer of the truck? Multiple problems here. Example of those swedged cables over here on the right, top right. You got your chain. You can see the code on there for the manufacturer. This happens to be, I believe, Columbus McKinnon. Here's an example of abrasion. Where? Look at where this sits on this sling. Look at the condition of this. It needs to be removed from service. You've got some serious damage on the sides. The hook might not be the best choice for a sling this big because it's approaching that angle where it's going to put a point load on the hook or on the sling if they were to pick up a big load. And there's an example of the swedging operation. You can see how it's melded together with the cable, and they've got the cable sticking out here on the end, so you can see that it's got a good clear bond. Inspect all the fittings, looking for deformation. Here's the tag of the chain. Each sling has to have a tag on it indicating its capacity in different formats. It's hard to read in this, but it'll talk about choker, gives you the 3/8 size of the chain, the grade of it, grade 8. It'll give you your reach, tell you different angles and different load indicators. Now I talked about the spinning device at the bottom of the hook. If you don't have one of those, if you've got a fixed end on a hook and you load it up, you'll get this bird caging effect, where basically the swing, as you go to pick it up, the load will cause the force to basically unwind that cable, as what happened here. Here's one that's been kinked due to overloading on a sheathing. Too much load got placed too close together and it caused a permanent deformation of that cable. It needs to be taken out of service. Example of a synthetic sling talks about the capacity for vertical, choker, basket. You see, it's twice that if it's a straight up and down basket, like this is being used. You got 2 attachment points. This has got a little extra protection device on the outside of the sling. It's to protect the fibers. All this is a Kevlar sleeve that protects it. Is it okay to stand underneath an elevated platform of a lift truck as long as it's not carrying its cargo? Well, of course that would not